What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I hope you guys are ready. We have a very special episode 100 for you guys. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you that have been on this journey with us. From the day one people to maybe you're new, but the people that have steadily supported the show and shown up, listened, liked, shared, commented, we greatly, greatly appreciate it. But I hope this serves up what you were expecting for a 100th episode, because we've been trying to make this happen for a little while, a little over a year. Yeah, I think so. It's been a little while, but I have an incredible guest for you guys today. Brenda Neckvatal is a 3-time best-selling author, award-winning human results expert, a serial entrepreneur. I mean, I really don't know what she doesn't do anymore. It just constantly adds to the list, but you guys will learn why in a minute. But her unique expertise has helped thousands of leaders and several companies transform their teams, fix toxic dynamics, and achieve real results. She's spoken on nearly 400 stages, offering her insights into leadership, conflict resolution, group dynamics, whether it's crisis management, helping Special Forces veterans transition to civilian life, or building high-performing teams. She's the expert you call when things get real. So, Brenda, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And congratulations, you said my last name right. Nobody gets that right.
You know how
Ever.
hard I worked on that? I just remembered being at the Eagle Rise room and you doing your whole thing, Neckvatal. And I was like, I gotta remember this. I can't mess it up.
That was impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things that stuck out.
It's Neckvatal, Neckvatal, and the Neckvatal. Just you name it. That's what it is. I'm the only one.
You're the only one.
I'm the only one in the country with that.
But hey, helps make you stand out, right?
Yeah, talk about branding.
Yeah, I mean, you got instant branding. Everybody else has to work on it. You change yours we get different coffees and stuff. She's like, oh, I'm going to be the HR lady today. Oh, no, I'm going to do this.
What do I want to wear?
Let's just go back to being Brenda.
My career wardrobe.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. And congratulations, 100 episodes.
Thank you.
Think about it. That's massive. I mean, people sometimes don't even get past 3 or 6.
I know. And people told me you're just make it a hobby. Whatever. You're not really going to do this. You obviously don't know me very well. I'm either all or nothing. If I'm doing this, I'm doing this. So here we are. But yeah, thank you. It's been a fun journey.
Yeah.
I mean, if I hadn't have gone on this journey, who knows if I would have ever have met you, for instance.
I don't think we would have.
I don't think so either. I mean, maybe.
We kind of have a circle.
We have a circle that interconnects. So
yeah.
I mean, I think that works. So for those that do not know who you are, can you tell everybody a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, a little bit of the Brenda story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joke and I say, first off, that I'm a recovering human resource professional.
My cousin's going to love that.
So going way back, my growing up was predominantly, it was in Erie, Pennsylvania. Apparently now the town jokes, they call it the mistake on the lake, I guess. I've heard that.
The mistake on the lake.
Mistake on the lake. But it's beautiful. I mean, it's a gorgeous area. It's a very small town. It was a steel town growing up. So it was a booming steel town. When I grew up, we had over 500,000 people there, and the population today is down to 82,000. So that kind of tells you, it's gotten back down to real super small town. It has an amazing history to it. Underground Railroad, bootlegging, War of 1812. I mean, it was a staple in the state. And so my father was a hospital administrator for 23 years. He grew that hospital into the 3rd largest campus in the state.
Wow.
Yep. So I was always around business, and I was always around physicians and doctors and the business of the hospital. I paid attention to what he talked about. If he was in the newspaper, I read it. He went down on a business trip down to Pittsburgh, and the company sent up a private jet for him, and I got to ride private very, very early on. And so I would listen. You know, I paid very close attention. So business was very interesting to me. You know, just watching him lead and move and whatnot. So I graduated. Now, my dad's from Hawaii. My mom's from Chicago. And so we always would go every, I don't know, year and a half, something like that. We would go back to Hawaii, where he grew up. And we'd hang out there for months. So it was always going back and forth growing up.
Which island?
Oahu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Windward side, for anybody who's paying attention. Anyway, so I moved over there after I graduated, lived out in Hawaii for about 5 years. And that's where I was employed with my first Fortune 500 company. It's the first time I ever learned anything about big box business, right? Got tired of being on a rock in the middle of the Pacific. I wanted 4 seasons again instead of surfing, 365. So I came back to the Midwest, eventually wound up hanging out in the Chicagoland, Wisconsin area for about 10 years. And then when I was working for CarMax, and I transferred to the corporate office in Richmond, lived out there for about 7 years. And then I've been in the Virginia Beach area now for 13. So do the math.
Yeah, you've
run the numbers.
I mean, you've done so many things, and you're so like, you guys, like, you could start to see a little bit here. Like, so Brenda and I think the very first time we met was actually at an Apex thing, because we're both members in Apex.
Did we meet at Apex?
I think we met there once, like we did, like, just casually.
Maybe.
And then, like, when we got to the Eagle Rise Summit with Jason Redmond, and we were there, we were in the first plank. We were the plank holders.
We're the plank owners.
Yeah, and the first class at Eagle Rise that you guys have all heard me talk about. She was the crazy HR lady I told y'all about that had all the, like, I've written all these books, I have this story. And I'm like, why the hell is she here? Like, she already does this. She's like, I have this podcast. I'm like, is she teaching the class? Like,
I taught a small segment of it.
Yeah. But it was like one of those things, like, I'm sitting here, like, I mean, first of all, like, I've talked enough about that. Like, you guys don't need to hear me talk about that anymore. But she was one of the, like, people that I did the class with. And, like, we got to, like, really get to know each other and hear each other's stories and kind of start diving into that. And it was just super cool. Like, yeah, I got to remember to bring up one of the stories you told there at some point. If I forget, you got to, like, key me in on that, because you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Like, that people will love that one for sure. But it's just so interesting, all the perspectives and, like, how we all ended up there. And I want to ask Jay. I haven't got to ask him, but I wonder, like, how intentional it was selecting the people that signed up. Like, did they turn people down, or was it like, were we the only, like, 12 people that signed up? Because it feels like, at least to me looking back on it, like everybody kind of fit a role, or everybody had, like, different things, and, like, everybody meshed really well together and, like, learned together really well. I mean, from not just the people that Jay brought in with his team and everything, but, like, even as classmates and people going through that experience together. I don't know if you feel the same way, but, like,
yeah, it was
we
very
were, like,
cohesive.
very tight and very interactive, and, like, we all blended and meshed and worked very well together. And, like, I mean, I still keep in touch with several of the people from there.
Yeah, so I've spent some time with Tim Brown. Mm-hmm. I was up doing the New York swim when William was swimming for it. Saw a bunch of other guys that I know.
So you guys know, when she says Tim Brown, that's the 9/11 guy I talked about.
Yeah, he was the gentleman that got stuck for a little bit, made it out. He was there at ground zero throughout the whole thing, and an awesome human being. So anyway, I was with him when he got up to speak. I was, like, right in front of him, and I could see him kind of, like, he always gets uncomfortable. It's like, because it's like reliving this stuff again,
Yeah.
Every time he talks about it, it's reliving it. So I could see him kind of fidgeting. He looks at me, and I'm like, you got this. And he smiled, and he winked, and he was spotty. He did an awesome job. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that, that was a great program, especially for somebody who's never spoken before, right? It really gives a very, very strong foundation on how all the things that you need to work on to establish a professional speaking business. And the contact was awesome.
And I don't think you have to go in thinking you have it all figured out either. Because like
You're
I felt
not.
like I did. And because like when I started getting the tasks and assignments, you know, of like, oh shit, we're giving a TED Talk. What the hell am I going to talk about for 15 minutes? You know,
Well,
like,
and TED Talks are very different too.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
a different thing than what I was like picturing. But like, I feel like it just, you don't have to have it all figured out because like part of the
No.
process, like, you know, like they're going to coach you and they're going to point out things. Like the feedback I got on and the one-on-ones afterwards was phenomenal. Like Jay was like, I know what your thing is now. And so did Sean. You know, they both came to me and were like, I know what your thing is
Yeah.
now. You got to find out how to make it work for you, but this is your thing.
Yeah.
And like that was awesome. Like, so I think a lot of people get scared to pull the trigger on something like that because you start seeing all the things that you have to do or parts of the process. You don't have to have it figured out. Guys, for the record, I had no idea what the hell I was going to talk about. What I thought I was going to talk about, I scrapped the night before and redid my whole thing. And I would do it again and scrap it again if I had the choice.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of so first off, I think part of the reason why we all gelled so well together is that we were all uncomfortable. And you know, when you get in a room full of people and you all experience something like that, that tends to bond people. I mean, we're talking about special operators. I mean, they go through their training and look at everything that they go through, and they have a brotherhood at the end of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's not just for SEALs. It's not just for Green Beret. Those are for the submariners. Those are from, you name it. Like
The first responders even.
Exactly, right? So that's proven, right? So every time you're in a group of people that you do something and everybody's on that same level, you're going to have that unique experience that is not going to, you can't separate it from anybody else. So that was it. But then also, you know, when it comes to speaking, like the biggest thing that I've always been an improv speaker. And that's primarily because, you know, if I'm teaching or I'm facilitating a class and I see every now and again people starting to disconnect, because I really try and like spice it up, make sure that I keep the attention of people, because like your company's paying me to be here, so you should probably try and get your money's worth out of it, right? Kind of a thing. But my thing was in that course, I struggled with the 0 to hero story. And part of the reason why I struggled with that is because I hadn't yet stepped into the identity that you see right now. And that was just a year ago. And that's a big thing. So if anybody's interested in going into public speaking and getting out, when you start talking about that 0, like I was nothing when I first started and here I am, I didn't even believe it. I hadn't yet gotten that point in my own world to be able to say, listen, I have done these things, even though I can tell you I've done them. You know what I mean? Like there was something in my own brain that I still hadn't convinced myself that it's okay to believe that you're the shit.
Right, and you guys are listening to her say that,
Yeah.
and I am sitting here telling you as the guy, like, I felt like I was the black sheep in the room. Like, I had no business in that room where, like, and I would have never thought that you felt that way or that you struggled with that at that point in time. To me, you were one of the ones that, like, had it down. She, like, aced everything. She was, like, the one that got all the points.
I just have repetition.
Yeah.
But where I sucked wind, and I knew I did it, was in my 0 to hero story. So I spoke on what I knew, and that was only on my career path. Now, if there was anybody in the audience, which there wasn't, but if there was, who was interested in becoming an HR person, they would have been very fascinated by that. And I know that because I've seen that happen a few times, right? I've played that out a couple of times. But they didn't know who Brenda was. They just knew who Brenda the professional was, not Brenda the person.
Yeah.
And so even now, so for me, that was a first step of like really reminding myself that you aren't the shit and you got some work to do. And I was so grateful for that. And then immediately after that, I started working with Nick Santanastasio. Do you know who that is?
I do because of you.
Yeah. Nick is awesome. Nick was born with hand-heart syndrome, and he was born with no legs, one arm, one finger. and he's spoken all over the country. So I worked with him, and I still work within his group and influence to now move more into a transitional type of speaking, right? So I'm not just rattling off information. I'm not just talking shop, telling stories. Now what I'm doing is I'm dumping value into people. That's my goal. Be a blessing every day. It's one of my core values, right? And helping people transition and give them food for thought that makes themselves confront the things that they're not coming up against within themselves, whatever that is. I don't know what it is. But if you're going to come and listen to anything that I do on leadership or whatever, and the things that I talk about, dealing with difficult people, building up your team, I'm going to throw things out at you that's going to challenge you. Like one of the questions I'll ask is like, what's stopping you from becoming the greatest version of yourself? You have to answer that, right? You can't hide from yourself forever, right? So, and I really love that kind of teaching, and I've rolled it into quite a bit of what I do into writing, just even my social media stuff that I put out.
Well, it comes across so real and authentic with you. Like, I can say that from sitting there in the class, and to break that down a little bit, we had some time where everybody got to kind of tell a little bit of their background, introduce, get to know each other and stuff like that. And at first, my first impression, like right out the gate, was like, oh man, she's just going to tell us about HR stuff like this. This is going to be...
That's what everybody's terrified of.
This is going to be so corporate. Like, I don't want to listen to corporate bullshit. I'm so glad I don't do corporate stuff. And then you started talking and like really breaking down, and I was like, whoa, there's way more to her than just this. Like, and then you started talking about all the different things you were involved in and doing and who you worked with, and I was like, okay, this is like the awesome blossom. Like, this is just gonna keep peeling back layers here. Like, this is loaded.
I need a shirt that says "Awesome Blossom" on it.
Yeah,
I
you
like
do.
that.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I actually, you know what? During the pandemic, you'll laugh at this one. Speaking of shirts, I had a friend of mine that should say something about like, "Don't be a Karen, be a Brenda." And I got the shirt, right? And I wore it out. The first time I wore it out, one of my friend's wives, his name was Karen, and she was so mad at me, and I burned that thing. I was like, we're not doing that again. That was a big mistake. Apparently the nice Karens they don't appreciate that.
Maybe just a sticker.
Awesome Blossom, though, we'll roll with that one.
Yeah, that'll work. Well, I don't want to like just jump to all this because I mean, like, I know this is where you focus and what you're doing now, but I mean, you really started out with such an interesting career journey, which was in HR, with major Fortune 500 companies, and then becoming a transformational speaker and then entrepreneur. And I know just from the times we've got to connect over the last year or so, you've made huge changes and pivoted and completely shifted. Can you talk about that a little bit and like give everybody like a little bit of background there and why you made the changes? Because I think a lot of people get really caught up and scared that they've done something for so long and they're completely afraid to pivot and change even though they know it's the right decision.
Yeah, you know, when you pivot, it's a risk, but it's also a blessing if you're pivoting properly. And I've pivoted the wrong direction too, but you just recover from that, right? So remember, I grew up around a gentleman, around my dad, who is all about business. So my HR experience has been business first attitude. Like it's like everything that I do has to impact the bottom line in a positive way, right? So the name of the game as I was growing up in HR was, and I still believe this to this day, is you have to find balance between doing what's in the best interest of the employee and best interest of the company. And there are going to be days where it's going to be employee, yes, and then other days where it's going to be it's company, yes, right? So it's duality in it. And it is extremely challenging sometimes. And sometimes you're in a situation where there is no right answer. There really is no right answer. That's when you have to fall back on your core values. So I started off in retail, working in the stores, you know, starting from the bottom up, no college education, some college education to no college education. And finally, I took the 20-year route on that one, which was a great benefit because I was actually doing the work before I got the theology and the education behind it. So I came in hard charger on the learning matter, impressed all of my instructors, which that doesn't do anything for me, just so you know. There was no, hey, let me help you get into a job that came out of that. But it was really awesome is that I got a lot of confirmation that, in fact, I had arrived, right? So 18 years of working within Fortune 500, not all of it being in HR, but all of it having to do HR, right? So when you're in like out in the field in management, and you're doing special projects for some of the companies, you're involved in that. It's like you're thrown into the deep end to start interviewing. Like, when you're a store manager, they don't teach you how to interview. It's like, congratulations, you just got promoted, go interview this person. Like, I have no idea how to do this, right? They give you a sheet of paper and you fill it out. You don't know how to ask the questions correctly. You are winging it, right? And the vast majority of people are like that, believe it or not. So I had to learn all of that. I had to learn how to do the paperwork. I was force-fed compliance to a degree. So I got it. So I got it from being a manager, and I was really more of more of your ops person than I was on the sales or the visionary leadership type of person. Okay. But I was the fix-it person, and I didn't know why. I was just really, really good at it. So, you know, like everybody who starts off in leadership and management, I started off in the beginning. And, you know, like I grew up, I'm an Xer, I'm a Gen Xer. Like, we were brought up differently. You know, I am the latchkey kid generation, right? Your parents like said, love you, kissed you, and wished you good luck for the rest of the day. You were on your own.
Be back when the street lights come on.
That's exactly right. We drank out of the garden hose and we survived just fine, you know? So I grew up as a very independent kid in an independent era, right? So I could always figure things out. And it didn't occur for me until later that my number one gift is, like you, identifying patterns. You can't explain how you do it, right? You just do it.
It's really weird.
Yes, right? But then I was able to use that to apply it towards patterns of people's behavior. And then I got really, really good at that. So when I was, like, I took a break from management and leadership for a little while because I was fried. I was totally burnt. I had a team. The store was closing. The whole company was closing down, right? They went into Chapter 11 and then they filed Chapter 13. And I worked my butt off. My store, out of the entire region that I was in, was the only store that was profitable. And yet the whole company was coming down. So that was a gut punch, right?
Ugh.
You know, it's like, why can't you just keep this one open? And, but no, it didn't happen that way. So I took a break, and then that's when I went into CarMax. And by the time I got done, because I was operationally driven, I could go in and flip things around. Like, I flipped that store around. It dropped down to, like, annual revenue was like $1.3 million, and I got it back up to 2.8, just because I ran it right, you know? So that's what made me the fix-it person. They would send me in, fix things, turn things around. Did it a couple other times with some other stores and a couple other companies, and I was just fried because even though I was fixing things and the money was there, and bonus is not a 4-letter word, right? I didn't have the respect of my team. They knew I treated them well, but we weren't cohesive. Everybody was still broken because they were recovering from being in a broken environment, right? So it bothered me, and I realized that I'm not the one that is the long-term driver. Like, I can give you some hockey stick results in a very short period of time, but to take that and transition it into the next level was not me at that time. So I struggled, right? So I would struggle with my own internal conversation about that, as anybody would. So when you realize that, here's the thing, when you realize that you have a shortcoming, it overrides your vision to show you all the great things that you're able to do. Everybody does this, except people that live in the shadow of their own ego, right? So average, normal human beings, even level keeled, we're always going, especially those that want to achieve, want to do well, we're always going to beat ourselves up because we see ourselves as not being enough somewhere else, and we forget we're fantastic at doing other things, right? So I was
so true.
Yeah. And I'm edgy, right? I'm a little edgy. I got a little edge. I'm nowhere near what I used to be. So I was really a diamond in the rough. So I got hired at CarMax, and I'm like, they're like, you sure you don't want to come into the management like program? Like, I just want to be yes sir, no ma'am. Just tell me what I need to do. I'm happy just working $8 an hour, kind of thing, right? I'm like, I'm good. But I was very blessed because I entered a shop. It was a high-performing store in a high-performing company with a high-performing leader. And his name was Tom, and it wigs him out every time I write about him or talk about him. He just weirds. He's like, would you stop? And I'm like, no. And Tom saw something in me that I didn't see. And so when I would sit down and I would do the paperwork with the customers, they would walk away feeling like $1 million. And that's exactly what he told me. He says, you are very edgy in a lot of different areas. He said, but the one thing that you have the capability of doing is making our customers feel like $1 million. That's your gift. I was like, wow. So he's the one that brought me into my very first formal HR position. And I cleaned up a mess of an office. And it was really funny. And she's a super nice lady. Her name was Brenda Pierce. So Brenda Pierce, like, I'm brunette, 5'9". I've been the same height since I was 13 years old. Same shoe size, right? Then Brenda was about like 5'0" and blonde. So at first when I started working, everybody said, well, if you got a question, just go ask Brenda. They go, which one? And my name for the longest time was Brenda, not Pierce, but the other one, right? So that's who I was Brenda, not Pierce, but the other one, until people finally remembered my last name. So Tom gave me the window, gave me the opportunity to work with my peers, which had always been a challenge because I'm always leading people, not serving them. So I had a flip. I started serving people, and it forced me to hone my sharpness down. I'm still very direct, and there's nothing wrong with being direct. As a matter of fact, being direct is like one of the most loving things that you can be. Is just straightforward. It really is. It's one of those compassionate, loving things because there's nothing wrong with being upfront about stuff, right? So I came in, and Tom taught me how to read policy. He forced me to read policy. We got to a point, and I learned something like a month ago, but I had done something for Tom that nobody else did. And when he would show up in the morning, I went like run into his office like my butt on fire, right? I'd come in, I'd have a stack of stuff for him to sign, lay it on his desk, say, morning. He said, morning. And he said, do you have anything for me? I said, yeah, I got a list for you. I said, what time do you want to do it? And he goes, around 3 o'clock. Perfect. And I wouldn't bother him the rest of the day. What I learned, and he loved it. What I learned about that was that I was the only person that was giving him peace at work. Because when it comes to men, you guys are single focus on things, and when anybody comes in and interrupts it interrupts your peace. And I had no idea that I had built that level of respect with him by not constantly interrupting his peace. And he spent so much time mentoring me. We'd talk about stuff. He'd challenge me. Like, I'd come in and I said, well, here's what's going on. I'd like to do this. And he was that genius guy that would just say something. You're like, man, I wish I could say that. And then he'd say, are you sure that's it? And I'm like, yeah. And then we used to play this game. It was called, well, you're wrong. Like, damn it.
Yeah. You know, looking back, I think I've had 2 bosses like that in my entire life that kind of, fit that role. Yeah. But it sounds like, and I think this is really kind of funny and ironic, and I guess this is going to lead us into talking about this sooner than later, that you like black and white, not a whole lot of gray area. Like you would prefer to just be very direct and keep it black or white. And that's one of the things I think is awesome, because your book about the 2 wolves,
Yeah.
I love the gray wolf. Like, and like really diving into that. And it was like, wow, what, like, again, it comes back to like the patterns and things. Like you just said, like, we both have this like thing for picking out or seeing patterns and things. Mine was more numerical or visually picking out patterns and stuff like that.
I can do the same thing.
But I haven't really thought about it in the aspect, and I need to, of what if you found the patterns in other things? And I'm sure I do this and I just don't realize it on a lot of other levels where you like decided to hone that on personalities and habits and how people are interacting.
It becomes very predictable for me. It's like, because I've seen the same pattern. So when I'm dealing with somebody who doesn't want to own up to their mistake or they don't want to take accountability, they act in a very certain manner. And under certain situations, it becomes extremely predictable.
Let's talk about that for a minute because that's a good one. And this is relevant for a lot of people, I think, right now. Accountability.
Yeah, huge.
Is it just me or does like 80% of the world not want to take any accountability for anything right now?
It's not you.
Okay.
And
just make
there's
sure.
statistical evidence to prove that. You want to hear it?
Yeah, let's go.
So I can't remember the name of the study. Believe it or not, it's actually sitting on my computer next to my computer. But there was a study that was done with 40,000 leaders. And the one question was asked is, when was the last time you held somebody accountable? And it gave a couple of different answers. The bulk of those, and I'm not kidding you, 80% said they wanted to hold somebody accountable, but they were not willing to do it. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I don't even think of it just from that aspect too. I think of it from the aspect too of like owning your shit, like when you make a mistake, because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has to learn. Everybody has to fail to learn or make a mistake. But the simplicity of owning that it's you, not anybody else, not any other reason, and just confronting that and owning that, like that is so rare. I mean, like I watch it day in and day out, like whether, you know, I talk about this a lot when I'm coaching some of the different guys of pick up your phone, make the difficult phone call. Don't just send a text message because that's easier. Don't just blast off the email. That shit has no tone. Pick up the call. Yeah, it's going to be a tough conversation. It's going to suck. Yep, we've all had to do that. Yep, you got to tell them that this project is going to shit and that you've got to figure some things out to bring it back online. Mm-hmm. But that's way better than sending the like half-ass bullshit email or text message that, I mean, most people are not Nobel Prize writers that can like inflect tone perfectly and get their message across.
No one can do that. No one can do that.
I mean, not even with AI, I don't think.
No,
I don't
you
think
can't.
You can even cheat that.
No, you can't, because there's always going to be somebody like receiving that information, and you can't guarantee how they're going to receive it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you want to know a little shortcut, because I know you're gonna love this, right? So, have you ever had somebody who just doesn't seem to show up on time consistently, and it doesn't? He's laughing over here.
I don't know anybody, not anybody in this room for sure. That never happens.
I was not aimed at you.
Kidding. I do hope you guys blew up his DMs this week, though.
So, but you have that one employee that just can't seem to come in on time, right? You've talked to them, and it's like, dude, you need to get here. When you sit there, this is very simple. When you sit there and tell somebody what they have to do, they're slowly tuning you out because their inner child rears up, and they hear you like they hear their parents when they were kids. Wah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. The best things that you can do when it comes to something simple like attendance is help me understand why you don't come in on time on a regular basis, and then shut up. And do not say a word. Let them feel the pressure of the silence to answer, because they will. They'll crack. I gave this advice years ago to an operations manager that was they were a federal contractor that did intelligence work. They built telephone technology for the intelligence community, and it was on Air Force One and stuff like that. And so he's like, I got a guy, comes in 15 minutes religiously every single day. And I said, well, did you ask him why? And he goes, no. I just keep telling me he has to come in. I said, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask him why. I want to say, help me understand. I said, I want you to use that phrase. Help me understand why you come in 15 minutes late every single day. Well, what do I do when he gets an answer? I want you to ask him, what are you going to do to fix this? Because this is not my problem. And he said, after we debriefed on it later, he goes, the kid was just like, well, I always stop at McDonald's to get breakfast on the way in. I guess I could leave 15 minutes earlier. He says, do that. And the guy was never late again.
That's impressive.
It's simple.
Yeah, it is simple.
It's so simple. And so the thing is that we try to convince people to do what we need them to do in a very loving, gentle way of asking them is like, what are you going to do to fix this? Because this is not my problem to fix. It's my problem to address, but this is not my problem to fix. So what are you going to do to make sure that you do X, Y, and Z moving forward? And then you let silence be your friend.
What's maybe been one of the bigger challenges as you've done this pivot from being this HR powerhouse to in traditional HR
You're good
to
for my ego,
more like human results consulting? I mean, Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, so I got a phone call from William Branham, the guy I wrote the book on Mission Ready with. He's a retired Navy SEAL. Literally calls me up out of nowhere one day. He says, hey, I said, what? He said, you are no longer an HR professional. You're no longer in human resources. And I went, okay. And he goes, you are a human results professional. I went, damn, I like that. That's pretty good. So the title came from Will. I will give him credit for that.
Good title, Will.
It is. It was real great call out on that one. But the thing is that I found myself moving more towards that. So HR is not what it was when I first started. It has changed a lot. And I don't want to be about compliance because honestly nobody cares about it, even though it's important. And I'll just be very honest about it. The generation of leaders that have come up were not taught like the generation of leaders that brought me up. The generation of leaders that brought me up knew that there was value of having HR at the table. Our community was much different back then too. There was a time, it was 2001 to about 2007, it was just killer. It was innovative, and it was sharp, and it was intelligent, right? And then it just kind of kept shifting into what we know it to be a little bit today, which it's not the same. We have a lot of people, especially in small business, which is about 50% of what's going on in the country. And I'm not saying this to bash anybody in HR, because I've been there, I've walked it. This was my customer base for a while until it wasn't. And it's not about having a seat at the table today. And the biggest reason is because this generation of leaders grew up understanding that all you have to do is just outsource HR, right? So there was no attachment to the value of what it can bring to the table. When you have somebody like me who's a business-minded person that understands that there's balance in compliance and in actual strategy, that's pretty fierce. That doesn't necessarily happen because we've got automated systems. And what you can bring in with a more automated system is you can bring somebody who doesn't have an HR background, you put somebody who's more of an admin. And that person therefore has to now learn everything, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just is not the same as what it was. And I wasn't happy. And I'm just like, you know what? I took a knee, I took a little bit of self-inventory, and I decided that I was going to focus in and rebuild everything, my life, my happiness, on my number one gift. Because if you start with your gift, you're going to win no matter what. Everybody has a single innate gift. We were born with this. This is a God-given thing. We all have, some of us have more than one gift, but we all have at least one. And that's what makes us so unique, and it's what makes us so great. We don't always see it that way. So I knew that I could identify patterns. You heard me talk about that when I was up on stage speaking. I'm one of those goofballs that can stand next to a running car, and I can hear the timing is off. I can hear it. I can do the same thing with marine engines. Any engine, I can hear when the timing is off.
How long did it take you to figure out what your gift was? Like, when did you fully come to that? Because you've talked about the 0 to hero thing, too.
Yeah.
When did that fully align and, like, narrowing that down? So you hear so many people really struggle with and trying to find, what is my gift? What is my purpose? What is my passion? And so many of these things get overlapped and overused and it doesn't get simplified down at all.
Your gift, in my view, is what God gave you. You were born with this, right? I'm dyslexic and I have gifts. Like that'll mess with your head, right? So to answer your question, honestly, it was 2 years ago. This summer, I'm turning 54. I was barely 52 years old and realized that I had gift. Give me a break.
That's wild.
I mean, think about it, because you're a big faith guy. Like, I'm a big faith person too, right? You know, a gift will open the way. A gift will make a way. It's biblical, right? So I played with that. I played with that theory a lot. And then I started sitting down. It's like, all right, so I literally sat down and I'm like, what are my gifts? What am I good at? And then it just came out, predicting. I'm like, I'm a predictor. Okay, great. How did I get there? And I went deeper. I'm not so much concerned about the passion. Like, if you're around me long enough, you know you'll figure out what I'm passionate about. Yeah. And I don't
no
think
question
about it.
there.
I don't think about it. I just, like, when I'm revved up about something in life, that is passion, right? You know,
it's like she can turn the HR button off, but she knows she's not crossing the line.
That's what you refer to as an HR neutral moment.
Yeah.
We've had a few of them already. Yes, and HR people swear. Some of them relentlessly. But I'm not one of them, kind of. Anyway, but yeah, I started going really, really deep with this. I wasn't worried about why am I here, what my purpose is, because I kept seeing my life unfolding. And I'm like, so long as I am stepping on the paths in front of me, I'm living a purpose. I just don't know what it is fully yet, right? So, but when you get into your gift, then you see how your gift impacts everything and everybody around you. That's something to look for. And the thing is that nobody can take your gift away. And who gives a flying fig if somebody doesn't like your gift? They have their own. Let them go figure out their stuff, right? One of the biggest benefits of being an independent mind, like I am, and being a very independent person, it doesn't always play out well for me, but where it does, is it has always helped me navigate through those moments in life where I felt alone or I didn't feel like I was enough. I don't quit. I may take a knee every now and again. I might take a pause and back up and take inventory, but I have never quit, and I've made it through 100% of my bad days. And I am still here whooping butt, sometimes my own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes too, and we're going to dive into this throughout this, but I think that speaks volumes too, because we've kind of touched on it. Like, both of us are very involved with first responders and the military and ops guys and stuff like that, and like that's something both of us are very passionate about. Yep. We have a lot of friends and family in those roles and in those, those circumstances. And we've talked about, like, just like with the plank holders, it's like there's a brotherhood there because you went through some stuff. And those groups don't just let anybody into their circle.
No.
And I think that speaks to your authenticity and the genuineness that you bring forth in the things that you do, because those guys love you. Like, and they swarm to you, and like they're around you, and like you resonate with them, and like that's for somebody that like observes a lot of that. I read it. I do it. Like seeing all that stuff. That's impressive to watch. Like even from like a side, like you like, wow, like, and to hear your thoughts on leadership and where that's changed over the last 2 decades, I think that's really interesting. Do you think that's some of what draws you to those groups of people and those types of leaders? Because I know for me, I think the corporate world has lost, and even just small business, just business in general, so many great leaders. There's just not. And a lot of people are like, they might be really good at this thing that they do, but that doesn't necessarily make them a great leader. And I'm super thankful for the people that I know and that I'm getting to know, and some of these things and courses I go and take and the books I read, because there's so many lessons in battle. And when the life's on the line and all these things that I don't know how others can't see. I mean, I get, not everybody relates to military and war and all these things. I mean, I've never been in war, but the leadership, the group, the values, the stuff that, like, you sit and watch Jocko and Leaf and all these guys, like, pound this stuff out there. Like, that's powerful. Like, and I think it is because, A, they have the experience behind them. No one questions what they did or did not do, and that they were either successful or not successful at it. And then when they can show them how that applies in their life as well, or the Jason Redman, getting off the X. Mm-hmm. That's so real for so many people, but yet so few people. I mean, like it's almost like turning into a thing now, I feel like more and more, but so many people don't have that.
No. The thing about, so I've been working with SEALs specifically for about 9 years now. So I was one of the original coaches at the Honor Foundation when it rolled into Virginia Beach. I've been doing this 9 years. I have now personally coached 33 fellows myself. That's a lot. That's a lot of experience.
That's amazing.
And then I make myself available to anybody else who wants to tap into my brain or my network, right? So there's a couple of things that I've learned to do. I've learned, first off, when you're walking into a room of elite people, whatever that is
to you, right?
Right. Your core values have a lot to do with this. And one of my I have 5 core values, right? One of them, you heard me say it earlier, is be a blessing every day. Be a blessing to somebody else every day. That means that when you're walking into an elite room and you're starting to talk to people, you have 0 expectations. You have no expectation whatsoever that you're going to walk out with something. Though, walking in, that when you come in as a very authentic individual with 0 expectations, you're going to walk out a winner, right? You know that because you've done it enough, and that's what happens to me. Like I was telling you earlier, when I flew down here this morning, I was sitting next to the guy who bought Michael Jordan's house in Chicago, right? And I have no expectation from him. I said, I might be able to get you a couple of blah, blah kind of clients. So we swapped information, right? Again, be a blessing to somebody else. Even on my way to the airport, I did something. Oh my God, if I was married, my husband would have whooped my butt. I was on my way. It's 4:00 in the morning. I had to get there I get to the airport 2 hours early because I can sit and work for an hour. Nobody
Thank you. I get so much shit for this.
No, I don't. Because it's also coming out of Virginia Beach, so we've got all these little military bases. So when our check security backs up, it backs up.
I'm just glad to know, I'm TSA pre-check, all this global entry, but I'm glad I'm not the only crazy person that has to be at the airport 2 hours early.
No, I have to be there 2 hours.
Because I've never missed a flight,
Neither
and I don't plan to.
Nope, I haven't either.
I can't take that stress.
I sit and I did it takes me an hour every day to do my social media stuff, and that's what I did, right? Getting away from that point. I don't even remember what it was now. Where were we going? Oh, walking in and not having expectations. So that's one of my 5 core values, right? The other one that is the biggest one is integrity, right? So that's doing things, helping people out or doing whatever, and nobody has to know about it, right? advertise it. So on my way in 4 o'clock in the morning, this guy is off to the side of the road, hood up, taking like one of those, the orange vests that truckers use with the yellow reflection stripe.
Yeah.
He's waving that thing in the air and he's like, come on. And I stopped and I rolled down the window. I said, you all right? And he goes, no. He says, I'm 2 hours late. So I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to die. I don't know what's going to happen.
About to get murdered on the side of the road.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's enough traffic around. So I took a risk on this one, and I normally wouldn't do it, but I'm like, this guy you could just see he was in pain. He was having a bad day, right? So I pull up, pop open the back of and I'm like, my cables are gone. I don't know where they are, which is not normal because you got your bug out bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know where my stuff is, and my cables are somehow missing. I have to figure that one out. But anyway. So, and he goes, oh, well, it's like, can I borrow some money from you so I can get like a whatever? And I said, tell you what, let me do this. I get on the horn, I call 911, get on the state police, and I'm like, giving him a description of who this guy is. He's still standing right outside of the door. He's frustrated. He's still looking for the next person who may have some cables. I'm like, can we get VDOT out here and get him some help? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I said, I got to go catch a plane right now, but you're taken care of. And he goes, thank you very much. And I drove off. Like, nobody was doing that for him for 2 hours.
That's crazy.
But,
again, the world is so crazy, you don't know.
I know. There's
a
something
woman at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I know. I'm going to get in trouble for that. Somebody's going to watch me. It's like, you need to start. So, but there was just something in me that knew it was the right thing to do. And I knew I was going to be all right. I don't know why. It's an instinctive thing.
Well, and I think you kind of nailed it there, too, of like, when you're walking into a room, you don't always know what all is in the room.
Yeah.
You might know you're walking into a high-level room or something like that of that nature, but you don't maybe have all the information. But when you are going in with a self-serving mindset or attitude, that has a look, that has a smell. Like, especially these higher-end operators and these elite business people and stuff like that, they can see that a mile away. Like, and when you're just in there trying to do you and get something for yourself, man, good luck, because that stands out a mile away.
And in that community, people know my name because of all of the help that I've given. And it is not to do anything else other than to serve. And when I got that way, when I had the idea to do this, I was working for ADP, and we were going to have a team building event, and one of my coworkers had said, hey, I got a really great idea. Why don't we all donate our time as HR people and help veterans get ready to transition out of the military? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am loving this, right? So again, Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. I was around all these World War II vets in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I heard the stories. I come from a blue-collar town. It's all about helping everybody out, right? Yeah. It's always about taking care of your neighborhood before you go out and take care of something else, right? So even though there were certain areas of my life growing up in Erie that were really rough, but that spirit was there. I always saw it. I saw it in our church. I saw it amongst the kids at school, like their parents. I saw it. So I adopted it. It's just, that's part of my worldview.
What else led you to wanting to work with operators and stuff like that? Because I know that's a big passion for you, and you do it relentlessly, and like that almost to me at times comes before anything else for you. At
it
times.
Does.
Like
yeah.
It's a true passion for you.
Yeah, it's a.
Where did that come from?
It's my nature. Probably because I'm just as straightforward as they are, and we get each other. Because you remember, what was that Blind Melon song back in the 90s, and the
Which
little girl
one?
in the bee outfit?
The rain song.
No rain.
Oh, yeah.
No rain.
No rain.
Right. The happy bee people that she meets? Yeah. The team guys are my happy bee people. And I tell them that, they're like, Brenda. And I'm like, that will never go anywhere else. So now it's on a podcast to deal with it. Anyway, but You know,
totally got Jay to dress up and do his little dance in the bee outfit, didn't you?
Jay would do it.
Jay would totally do it. Jay loves any opportunity to dance.
Oh, God, yeah. But no, it's just like, you know, I understand how they talk. I understand how they think. I understand their ethos. That's a big thing. So that's what you call alignment. That's alignment with their values and mine. And believe it or not, it was helping SEALs do this that actually, I didn't know this. You know how many team guys are faith guys? Big time. Lot of faith in the SEAL teams. And it's what got me back into focus in my relationship with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it's really wild when you think about it, or you hear their stories and their journey in that, because those guys have sacrificed more than most can even fathom or imagine.
Yep.
And they've had to do things that, you know, not many people could do. Not many people could stomach. Not many people, you know, like, and they've done it, and they've had to come to terms with all those decisions and everything else. And to hear a lot of their struggles and what is rock bottom for an operator, I mean, that's wild shit. I mean, that's shit movies are made out of. But then you see them find it and come back, and like to know that they had that acceptance, that forgiveness, and that's what helps them get past all that. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about very masculine men that are out, who love their wives, they love their family, they love their kids. They are away from them for 300 days out of the year.
Yeah.
They come back to a dynamic, a dynamic that they're no longer as close to and familiar with, after being in another dynamic, which is pumping up their endorphins, challenging, you know, pushing them to the edge. And then they come home, and then now they have to be somebody completely different, you know. So that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of courage for any man.
Yeah.
But now imagine you do that 20 years, 25 years. I sat down with the man the other night. He's almost the bullfrog. He should be the bullfrog. The man's 58 years old, and he's still a SEAL, and he's still an operator.
Holy shit.
He's one position under the current bullfrog, right? That's what they call frogmen. The oldest serving SEAL is the bullfrog, right? So awesome, awesome guy. Can you imagine now leaving the military, leaving what he loves to do the most, and how is he supposed to transition and translate bullets, bombs, and bodies into a civilian sector that doesn't understand him and he doesn't understand it?
And still find a purpose,
Yeah.
or a passion,
Yeah.
that translates.
Yeah. So when we were talking, we were doing mock interviews just last Tuesday, this past week. And I got a chance to do some mock interview work with him. And I asked him a question, and what I got was this amazing history lesson of some pretty generically worded, but yet still really cool stuff. And I stopped him, I'm like, listen, I said, you've got an immense amount of information. But here's what I need you to do. When you're, pretend like I'm a CEO. Which, good news, I am one, right? But talk to me and give me that answer like you're talking to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because I know you've done it. Talk to me like you're talking to an embassy leader, because I know you've done it. And I know when you talk to somebody like that, you tie everything in together. Right now, you're not tying anything in together. And all it took was that little tweak, and he jumped on it, and he nailed it. And he goes, that was good. It's as simple as that. It's just minor adjustments. It's not like we come in there and we tell them, it's like, you know, tell us our deepest secret fears. It's not, no, we're here to help you win so long as you follow what it is that we're saying. And sometimes we don't get it right, you know, and no leader does, right? You don't get everything right 100% of the time. Companies don't always get things right 100% of the times. But we can help you fine-tune And the way SEALs think anyway is 2 is 1, 1 is none, right? 2 minds are better than 1, and no man is an island. So they rely on it. They want the collaboration. They want that feedback. Like, we're not shy of giving it to them. And for a long time, like when I was first learning this stuff, if I had a question, they would say something. Like, they have very specific jargon and vernacular. I just learned something new the other day from another one, right? So it's like I learned these things, and I'd hear them from the first time. I'm like, okay, I need to ask you a question, and I'm going to frame it this way. Red, yellow, green, like a stoplight. And they're like, okay, you need to tell me if you're in a red zone, a yellow zone, or a green zone. And they're like, no problem. Like, they got that, right? It's like, I need to ask you a question because I don't understand what you're telling me. And the only way I can help you is by you answering the question, but I don't want to ask you a question that I'm not supposed to, right? You know, I was like kind of like doing this runaround thing. So I learned, and I applied, and I adopted, and I read all the books, you know, and, you know, I studied it. I watched the videos. I didn't watch the Hollywood stuff. I watched what was being put out, and I would listen. I would listen for the vernacular. I'd listen for the openings. And that's how I learned. I learned their environment with them and without them, right? And, you know, there are a couple of incidences where I probably could have done a better job, you know, but I was still learning. You know,
I mean, you're diving right in.
You're gonna flop at some point, but you said it earlier, is that failure is the greatest teacher, and it really is. So you got to be comfortable failing.
You have to.
And that means you're going to lose people, you're going to lose things, you're going to lose place. But what you do with that is what matters. And you can either sit there with your thumb in your mouth and feel bad for yourself for the rest of your life because you failed at something, or you can march on and still deal with that anxiety, but yet never give up.
And sometimes you need a little time to do that too. Like, this doesn't always happen like instantaneously.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to soak in your poopy diaper, as you like to say sometimes. You know,
that's
like,
not my thing. I got to give Nick credit that one.
But you know, like sometimes you have to sit in that for a minute and like really like figure things out. Like, and that's okay too. You know, like, you know, you're talking about this. It reminds me of the other week. Like, I was having a really terrible week, and on the podcast last, I wore one of my favorite T-shirts, my Crush Everything shirt.
Yeah.
It just happens to be from the same company.
Dom.
Dom. I'm a huge fan. He's one of those people that's on my list of
Dom's
people
an
like,
awesome
whether
guy.
I ever get to do a podcast with him or not, I don't care. He's still somebody I would like to sit down and have dinner with.
Oh, he's
awesome.
awesome.
Just to have a conversation with. The fact that this guy does so many amazing things. He's got a legendary career. He does so much to help, and he puts his faith and his family and everything at the forefront of everything. And he gets crucified on a lot of it a lot of times too. I mean, like, man, the internet is not nice to this guy. And, you know, one of our good friends from our class reached out and was like, cool T-shirt. And I'm like, thanks, man. You actually know what that is. And it started this back and forth between me and Johnny Savage. And we were going back and forth. I was like, actually, like, check it out. Here's my carry blade. He's like, check it out. Here's mine. I was like, check it out. Here's my Dom's cross sticker, my Silent Night sticker on the back of my truck. Here's the one in my office. And we were like, he's like, all right, enough. And he sends me a picture, and it's him and Dom.
Yeah.
You know, Dom giving me the fist bump. You know, like, nice shirt. He's like, I had to show him you wore his shirt on your podcast. I was like, that just made my day. And you know what? One of the first things he said to me after that, and Johnny Savage is one of those people that if you know his story, and hopefully he'll be in Texas sometime and we can have him on here because you guys need to hear Captain Savage's story.
This
is wild, man. This guy got lost at sea. Like,
yeah, imagine being in the middle of
shark-infested water.
the Gulf of America, and there's no boat anywhere to be found.
Yeah. So you can only imagine what that would do to somebody's faith that survived that.
Yeah.
So I would put him on the a little bit more extreme side of like really being in tune with his faith as compared to someone like myself. Like, he is super in tune. And you know what? The first thing he said to me was, hey, man, pray for Dom and his family. I'm like, pray for Dom and his family? Like, that guy has everything you could think of. Like, that guy's like doing everything.
Well, he
like,
goes through it
that
too.
guy doesn't need any prayers. He's like, no, man, the devil like attacks him constantly, and like you should see the stuff he has to deal with. And I'm like, wow, perspective, you know, like even someone like that. And like the first thing he asked was like, hey man, would you say a prayer for him? I mean, if you like Dom and you like what he's about, stuff like that, say a prayer for him. Might go a long ways.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So it's just weird how all these things. Yeah.
We all go through stuff. Every single one of us is carrying something, and it's not that we forget that, we just don't remember it. We just sometimes forget to remember.
That devil, the comparison thing too,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and you let the few bad things, the few negative things like dictate everything. And sometimes it's just a little reset.
Yeah, that's
all
all.
that's needed.
Yep. Minor tweaks.
Minor tweaks.
Yeah.
So one of your specialties, I think, in managing like group dynamics and helping leaders handle some of their toughest personalities, maybe?
Yes.
How do you approach working with leaders who are really struggling with like getting in their own way and how they are leading others when that's like a problem within their group?
So the ones that contract me, like they're coming to me. See, that's the difference. They're coming to me for the solution. Like they're coming for help. Nobody's going to change if you constantly tell them what they're not doing
What
right.
about in the scenario where like you're brought in maybe by like, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example that's not something you've told me, so I don't get anybody in trouble or go down a different lane here. But like, let's just say, for example, and I'm totally trying to make this up off the top of my head, CEO or CFO is the problem, or maybe like they're the ones that they're trying to find a way to bring in some correction or some help. And maybe it's someone below that in the chain of command that has reached out to you and they're trying to like bring you into the company to help with these type of like leadership issues.
So here's the thing with that specifically. When the request for help comes from the middle, the top is not going to move. The only way somebody's going to change is if they are willing to do it. So looking at this scenario specifically,
Yeah.
my question would be, so if I get a call from somebody in the middle that says, we got a really toxic CEO. Now there are some out there. I have worked with a couple of them, and they're not going to change, right? It's like part of their nature, right? It's the scorpion and the turtle type of situation. But when you have somebody in the middle, my very first question is, help me understand your definition of problem. Help me understand what your definition of toxic is. Help me understand, like, I want to hear through their lens what they're looking at. And usually what happens is when I get these types of questions, I'll go to the CEO and I'm like, tell me about your people problems. And you know what happens? They are their vision's not remotely close. That's the real problem. Because here's the thing, when you have a CEO, especially like in a small business, you're a great example of that. You own part of a business. It's one of your babies. It's one of your children. You want people on the inside to nurture it just as much as you would, correct?
Absolutely.
Employees don't see it that way anymore.
Right.
That's instant misalignment right there. So if the middle or the support or senior leadership underneath you, your managers, right? If they don't get what it is that you want to do, that misalignment is always going to be there. That's why I talk about core values being such a strong principle. We talked about Pastor Keith Craft earlier.
Yeah.
This man is absolutely amazing. His number one core value that translates into everything that he does, from business to his family, to his relationship with his wife of 40 years almost.
You got me on this one.
I think they're 40. You're getting close to it. Anyway,
Yeah.
his number one core value is never let good be the robber of great. And he measures everything he does against that core value. People don't know how to do that anymore in today's world. Some people do, most of them don't, because they've never heard this before, right? So if a CEO's focus is on making sure, so like every business leader is going to have people issues and process issues, right? You're going to be dealing with one of the two, and then finance is like a whole another ball of wax, right? So when you look at your people issues, when you ask a mid-level manager, like, what are your people issues? They're going to tell you how often Bob is late and why Judy doesn't seem to want to do everything and blah, blah, blah. When you ask a CEO what their people issues are, a CEO is going to come out and tell you, I don't have the right talent in place to take this product line and grow it to this percentage point. I don't have the right people in place or capable or even have the heart to be able to make this goal happen. That's the difference. Again, that's not an alignment. So if you have a culture that doesn't trust the CEO, your team is building the culture, right? So as a leader, as a CEO, your culture, your focus on it, your ability to articulate what your expectations are, to get them to understand how important their role is, to put the right people in place. And sometimes you have to keep that position open for a while until you get your next good fit. If you don't do those things, if you're not leading that way, that culture, somebody else will, and it's going to be the wrong person in your company, right? So that's what I run into all the time. Now, there are situations where you've got somebody that owns a company that does not have strong morals, that has, but like I had one client a long time ago. I got 2 HR people running a company of 20 people. And I'm like, you have 2 HR people for 20? Yes, because we have to keep the CEO in line. Why? Well, he was busted by putting a camera in the women's bathroom and went to jail for it.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. You didn't hear that story before, did you?
That's a little different.
So, the guy makes a lot of money. So, you and I briefly talked earlier about entitlement, and he was that bad, right? They just needed him to just be the face of the company, the figurehead. Everybody else was running the show and making money. That guy, all he had to do was pick out which foreign exotic he wanted to bring in that day, and every time I went there, it was a different car in his parking lot. From a Maserati to a Lamborghini to a Ferrari, like you name them all, right?
Yeah.
Every single one of them. He had them all. One of every one, right? That's fine, great, but he didn't have a lot of character, right? So that's what people will start measuring up against is character. And again, that's where misalignment comes in. Now that guy had really bad character. He got penalized or he served his time, right? He paid the piper for it. And they put different controls in place to make sure that stuff like that was going on would never happen again. And it never did, right? So that's the difference. When you've got somebody who's that morally inept versus somebody who does have the morals, but just needs to drive the culture. And sometimes they don't know how. Sometimes they don't see the benefit of, like, sometimes they just want everybody to just shut up and do their job, right? The CEO owns every problem in a company, every single one. Doesn't mean that they're the ones solving it, but they're the ones that own every single problem in the company. They need their people to solve the problems. And so when they're not, that takes their focus away from moving the needle and finding the next business opportunities and bringing in more money. Because what is the CEO's number one job? What is their number one responsibility?
To build the team.
Close. You keep the doors open so they can make payroll. That's their number one responsibility. Sure. Yeah. A lot of people say, well, it's profit. No, that's not it. Business's number one responsibility is to keep the door open and make payroll. Everything else is secondary beyond that. So if they're constantly being distracted from doing that because they don't have a team, they haven't either nurtured or they don't have the team that has the right skills to do it or the mindset to do it, it pulls away. So it's, that's why leadership is hard.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's
You
hard.
constantly have to work at it and learn and self-evaluate and figure out what you've done wrong, what you could do better.
Yeah.
Do you think that, because you've kind of talked about this a little bit, how it's changed from, like, you gave an example earlier, like 2001 to 2007, things were just innovative, things were rocking and rolling, everything was great. And then obviously we had the market crash at like 2007, 2008, where like a lot of things went down for a while, and then everything went back up again. Then we had COVID, and now we're in this whole another cycle, and things are changing. And do you think in that time period that there was a lot of people in management roles or leadership roles that were so afraid to micromanage that they just didn't put these other things that we're talking about that are so important, core values, training, team building, leadership building, that we got so far away from that they just kind of like tried to let the ships run on their own?
No, I don't. What I saw happen was a couple of things. Leadership changes from one generation to the next. It really does.
Absolutely.
So boomers and Xers are closer in traits than Xers and millennials. And part of that is that, we were like right about that 2007, 2008. And I remember they started talking to us when I was at CarMax, they started talking about this new generation called Generation Y and how different it was going to be. Well, here's the thing. Generation Y was heavily influenced by technology. And here's the thing. I don't like it when people bash other groups. I don't like it. I don't tolerate listening to that stuff. And there were a lot of people that were saying, like, Generation Y is this, Generation Y is that, blah, 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 millennials. Well, here's the thing. Millennials were very drawn to technology because they were born with a computer. We weren't.
Yeah.
You're more of a millennial than I am, age-wise.
Yeah, they keep changing it,
yeah.
so, who knows?
So you're like you're like an X-wire.
I identify as.
So you grew up with a computer. I didn't.
I mean, yeah, I had to put the disc in the, I was like
dude, we had
10 or 12
DOS.
years old. The dial up, you had the new AOL disc, and
we had DOS, and your wrestling coach was the only person that knew how to work the computer in your school, right? So, and our first time I saw a computer, I was in middle school. I was in 7th, 8th grade when I saw a computer for the first time.
Yeah, it was probably about that for me.
Yeah, I was mid-'80s.
Yeah.
So.
Playing Oregon Trail.
No, we had DOS. You had to type in the command, right? There was one color on your screen, blinking. That was it, right? So
I was trying to give you a little credit here. And
hey, I own my age. It's all good. So, anyway, so they were brought up with technology, and then it morphed into cell phones. So what has happened with this generation is that they got really good at getting the answer a lot faster, where our generation, more mine than yours, like we had the Dewey Decimal System and a frickin' abacus, right? So like we had to show the work.
Texas Instrument Calculator is the size of a laptop now, your iPad.
there was no shortcut. Like we were still using our fingers and toes to do math, right? Like that kind of thing. So that in and of itself was a shift. So when you have somebody that can get information, so it's kind of like that delayed gratitude, delayed response type of thing, right? What's the phrase I'm looking for? I'm looking for a specific phrase. When you don't do something and you delay the experience.
Delayed gratification?
Gratification, not gratitude. Gratification, right. Delayed gratification. It's almost like that, right? So what happened is that technology started to trim back the need for critical thinking because the information is there. Look what we've got today. We've got Chat GPT that has an IQ of 160 and growing, right? That thing is so badass, it's unbelievable. I use chat all the time because it makes me sound a heck of a lot better with my dyslexic brain than what I can put, right? So I use it very strategically.
Cleans up my emails a whole lot, I can tell you that.
Right? So I use it very strategically, and I use it to help me fill the voids in my gap. But I am a critical thinker. So millennials coming up, like our generation, the boomers, we were trying to teach people these hard lessons, and what they wanted was something different. They wanted to innovate. They didn't want to do the tried and true. They wanted to
want to fail.
Create something new. No, they wanted to create something new. They didn't want to fail. They wanted to create something new. They wanted to work together collaboratively rather than being independent and standing on their own feet, right? So I knew when all that was starting to come out, I'm like, these guys are going to have some hard life lessons, because we learned ours. Like I said, my first day at work ever was like, I had bosses and they would tell me, like, under no uncertainty, you do this, do this. And if you don't like it, there's the door. Don't let it hit you in the ass on the way out. Literally verbatim, right?
Yeah.
You can't treat a millennial like that.
You can't even say that anymore.
You couldn't say it back in the mid 2000s either, right?
I felt like you could. It wouldn't
right
have the
person.
consequences that it does now.
Yeah, exactly. So
just like you couldn't have a Bond movie the same way it was in the 70s.
you know,
slapping everybody on the ass.
and Roger Moore
good old boy.
porking everybody.
Yeah.
But anyway, but the thing is that that's when I started to realize that if you want to, and I'm not casting any blame or anything like that. I just saw this transition starting to happen. I was brought up as an employee with very specific principles. When you want to get away from those principles and your preference is to try something new, you're not standing on a principle, you're operating on a preference. So the difference between principles and preferences is that principles are very objective. They're tangible. They hold weight. It's a foundation to build from. But if you want to try something new, you can't do that with a foundation, because the foundation is already in place and then you build up from there, right? So if you're trying something new, now you're rolling into preferences, which means preferences are subjective. It means that it's something different to somebody else. And when you saw that with collaboration. So going back to the operators again, SEALs collaborate in a very specific way. One thing that is common with every single SEAL who has ever served is that when they get done with an op or they get done with a training, they hot wash it. They'll sit down, they'll do an after action report, and then
debrief, basically.
Debrief, exactly. Yeah. And they'll get into a room. They may not even have showered yet, right? And as it's fresh, they'll go through what worked, what didn't work, and then the things that failed, people will start going around the room taking accountability for that. That is a very specific foundation. That is that's an ethos, that's a principle, right? So collaboration, for what I saw with the millennial generation, rising millennial, they wanted to try the new things. So there was no foundation like that. They were creating it along the way. But now it opened up to subjectivity, because that whatever it was that they were talking about would have meant something different to everybody. So like the word teamwork, right? If I were to ask you, what is the number one most important thing about teamwork, what would you say? One word.
Communication.
Okay, mine is competence. So are we in alignment on what teamwork is?
No.
Exactly. That's why it's so important. So now that's a preference. So that's why it's important as a CEO, as a leader, is that you got to get clear on what these things are, because it's what forms the foundation. So if the principle of teamwork could be communication and collaboration, now we have an understanding of one another. We may not necessarily agree it's the most important thing, but we get each other.
Yeah.
Now we can move forward just like the team guys do, and they come back from an op, sit down, debrief. They're all on the same page. They're all in this ethos. They're all coming from the same place, because that's how it works. You and I can sit down after a project. We get each other because we have these principles in place, and we're not operating off of preferences. Now, when you operate off of preferences, that's when you got problems, because, well, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. Like, it was your responsibility to do this. Now, instead of accepting responsibility, which we started talking about earlier, now you're talking about people who are deflecting it. They're not willing to take accountability because there's no foundation. And so what happens is that reigns the day, it's principles, it's preferences, not principles.
That's powerful. That's a lot. All right, what?
You almost need a shot after that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Biz, you're slacking over here. Like, let's see. We got some questions or comments. Let's see here. Yeah. Josh, yes, we had computers in the colony. Like, I'm surprised Little Elm did, but you know, I mean, yeah.
Paul Revere checked in.
Yeah. Yours was trust. His was trust.
What was that?
His word would have been trust.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even that can be subjective too.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people try to demand trust and respect and don't worry about earning it.
Yep.
And it becomes this authoritarian dictator
Yeah.
environment a lot of times where they feel like they've done enough and that should be seen or known. And it's what they want, but they're going about it all the wrong ways.
Yeah.
I mean, because we had this interesting conversation, me and one of my other colleagues that runs my construction department a while back, where we were talking about this very thing. And him and I are probably, aside from my other two partners, the longest tenured people there. I mean, you know, I'm coming up on 17 years. I think he's coming up on 19 years. So the things we had to do when the company was yay big and growing and we were very, you know, bootstrapped, you know, and doing everything all on our own and working crazy hours and sleeping on the couches at the office and doing all those things. The other people that have only been with us 3, 4, 5 years, they weren't a part of that. They didn't see that. That's not their norm. That's not their reality.
They came in at a different
And we
stage.
can't expect them to know that or see that. But if we haven't put in place the values and the principles and these guidelines and these clear messages, how can we possibly expect them to buy in or to get it? But yet, it's easy to fall into that loop of, oh, well, we paid our dues. Like we did this work. Like you're just gonna do this because I say, or you know, you should see this, or you should want to do this, or you should automatically have this kind of drive, and people are motivated by different things. So not having that core system is there something like we've been having a lot of discussion about and evaluating because it's crucial.
Yeah. I used to work with a finance woman, and she would get very frustrated when like travel reimbursement paperwork wouldn't come in and it wasn't filled out properly. And she would just rant about it. And I said, well, do they know how to do this? Well, they should. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this for a second. Okay.
Yeah.
Just, like, you got to teach them how to do it, right? You got to set the expectation. They're not going to instantly come in. Like, if you don't make it important, it's not, if they don't understand that it's not, if it's not important to you, like, if you don't do anything about it, that's the message. Like, oh, it's just a line and it doesn't really mean anything because nobody told me it meant something, right? But when you're a government contractor like we were at the time, right? And if this is really important because you're going to get audited, which you will, like we always, every year we always had to get a third-party auditor. This is where I have to geek out a little. It's part of your DCAA and your DCMA compliance, right? There's a lot of compliance in government contracting. So when the paperwork isn't done properly, bitching about it isn't going to help you out. Get out there, get on the phone and say, hey, listen, let me walk you through this. And they said, well, I walk it through with them, they still don't do it. And I said, then hold them accountable. You know how you scare somebody into getting the travel reimbursement done properly? She goes, how? I said, don't pay it. Send it back and say until it's right, then you'll get your money. She goes, oh. you paying it, and the paperwork's wrong, all you're doing is you're teaching them that it's
That's
okay.
Yeah.
So don't pay it. Well, the CEO, I said, I will handle the CEO on this one. And I talked to him, and he says, I've been telling her that for years. I was like, well, there
I mean,
you
it's
go.
the same thing with our guys with coding paperwork properly for our office managers.
Yeah.
You know, like if they don't do that right, they mess up their entire world. But I'll tell you what, if they don't do it right and she doesn't pay that sub their check because they get paid every 2 weeks, I wonder how they're going to get that sub to do work for them when they didn't get their check because they didn't code shit right or they didn't turn their shit in on time.
Yeah, and these are the kinds of things that negatively impact people that sometimes are innocent bystanders in this stuff. Like I had a guy years ago, it didn't happen at work, but he had a stroke, right? He went out and you know, there's a lot of back and forth conversation when you're in the HR seat and somebody goes out on a leave for something like that. And his doctor's office didn't code the billing properly. A year and a half it took for him to get angry and frustrated at me. I can't fix it. That's not my role. That's a billing issue at the hospital. I've helped him submit the paperwork. I did what I could within the boundaries that was appropriate and legal, by the way. And so he would still get angry. He stopped talking to me. I'm like, I can't, I don't know what more to do. I don't know how to help you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I even wound up talking to the manager of that person who miscoded it. I'm like, you're a manager. You can override it. Can't you just go in and fix it? No, she needs to do it. And I'm like, she's needed to do it for a year and a half. And this is the boss I was telling you about, Tom walked by, and I'm like, what is it going to take for you to do this? Help me understand. And that's when I learned to help me understand. Why can't you do this? And then I kept nailing it with, help me understand, help me understand, help me understand. And finally, I got her to come out and say, I don't want to. And I'm like, I want her to do it. And I said, she's not gonna. So can you please prevent the collection agency from coming out to this guy? Because that's what's next and you know it, right? So everybody, it's this...
Yeah.
It's this principle thing, and unless they, people are held to it, they're going to, like water, it's going to find the path of least resistance, right?
All right. I think this will be a good time for you to tell this story. Now that you told me you can tell this story, it's safe to tell because you told this story at the Eagle Rise Summit, and I was like blown away.
I might need
by
another
this
bottle of water for this one. Oh, you are awesome. Thank you.
He didn't get me a drink.
It's not
he likes
vodka, is
Brenda. He doesn't like my sidekick. Doesn't like me.
What do you need, sir?
My eyelashes are longer.
I know. I'll take anything at this point. Coffee, green tea, whatever.
You want to trust that, or you just want some water just to make sure you're okay?
Sure.
All right, I'll get you another bottle of water.
You're the man.
And Josh says you should have your own podcast.
She does have her own podcast.
I've had 3 in my time.
There you go, Josh.
Don't worry, Josh. I'll link you up with the cool kids, Josh. Maybe.
Thank you, Josh.
She might hold it against you, though, that you're from Little Elm.
No.
He had dinner, so
Yeah. He take care of his priorities. All right, you got to tell us the story.
You got to ramp it. You got to lead me into it.
I got to lead you into it.
gotta
I don't
lead
want to
into it.
I feel like I'm going to tell too much because it's the...
Start with how you heard it for the first time. Do that. You can do an intro, like...
So you were telling us how you were working at this company and you got brought in to fix a problem.
Yeah.
And there was this
it's big situation.
character in this situation that I think was at first just making people really uncomfortable.
Yes, and I'll take it from there. So that's exactly what happened. This is a perfect example. Now it's really funny. I freak people out when I say this, especially leaders.
Thanks, sir.
Because I'm like, interview slow, fire fast. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, like really. Remember, I'm business minded. I align HR to the direction of the company. I don't try and make the company align to my ideals in HR, right? So that's not my job. That wasn't my purpose. So I was the director of HR at the time, and we had a gentleman who was starting to say things to incite fear in other employees. And we had sit down, had a conversation about it. And again, this is an extreme situation. I get a phone call from his manager one day, and my office was in Norfolk. My other office with this company was 2 hours away on a government base. So I get the phone call, and he says, "You got a minute?" And when I hear that, it's like my to-do list, I just crumple it up and throw it right over the back of my shoulder.
Today just changed.
This is, yeah. All right, lay it on me. And he told me that he said something that was so egregious that it freaked 2 employees out, and rightfully so. I went, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'm on my way." Walk into the CEO's office, I'm like, "I gotta go. Here's what happened." He did it again. He said something. It is now like 2 people are scared. And he goes, "Go." I said, "I'll call you when I have an update." He goes, "Not a problem." So that's let me tell you something. What an honor that is to be able to have the trust of a CEO to let you go do your thing.
Absolutely.
Like, a tremendous amount of respect for him on this one for that. I get up there. I meet with 2 special agents. So in this particular base, our badges to get onto the base, mine was an unclassified badge. That's underwritten by the CIA, right? So there's a lot of compliance that comes into doing government work. And I promise you, the same body of government, if any of you are listening to a government contractor, the same body of government that tells you have to do something is the same body of government that's going to get you into trouble. So I get up there, I talk to the special agent. They're well aware of what's going on because we had called them before I left. And I said, "Here's what I want to do. We're going to bring him off the base. We're going to require him to drive his own vehicle. He's going to surrender his keys, his badge, and his equipment, and I'm going to put him on administrative leave." He says, "Okay, what do you need from us?" "I just need you to sit here." So he comes in, tried to take one of our company vehicles, and we had it all planned. I'm like, "Listen, he's gonna pull this because this is what he does. He doesn't follow instructions, and he does it deliberately. So make sure that," I talked to his boss about it. So I had his boss with me, and then we had the lead with him. And I said, "You make sure that he does not get into our company truck because it's just, we don't want him back on this base until we resolve this," right? So sure enough, he tried it. He says, "Dang, she was right?" So they said, "No, you need to take your vehicle just like what we told you." So he comes up, and we sit him down. I've got one officer in an office over here with the door open, just kind of like listening to what's going on, but pretending that he's doing some work on the computer and whatnot. And I got the head of facility security sitting right next to me. The guy comes in, we sit down, and we have our 2 managers. And I said, "Listen, this is what's going on. You said this. We've gotten this report for it. And we've already had a conversation about scaring the crap out of people. That's not appropriate. So here's what we're going to do." He goes, "Am I fired?" And I'm like, "No, you're not fired. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you on what's called an administrative leave, which means that you're not going to be coming into work. And we're just going to get some space. And I need to figure out what's going on." Okay? So I'm going to be your one and only point of contact. I'm going to take your keys. I'm going to take your badge. I'm going to take your iPad. You and your personal stuff, you take it with you. That's fine. Or not. Leave it. Whatever you want to do. Right? We're going to put you on a paid administrative leave. And I'm going to start figuring out what's going on so that we can sort this out. I want to make sure that we're doing this so that we're saving your dignity just as well as we're addressing the issue. So we want to make sure that, there's no misunderstanding, no conflict, no bad judgment, nothing like that. And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm positive." I said, "It's okay." I said, "You're going to hear from me in 3 days." "Okay." So he gets in his car and he goes, and the security looks at me. He goes, "You've done this before." This is first words out of his mouth. He
Not
goes,
my first
"Wow."
rodeo.
Yeah, it's like not my first day, right? So we wound up interviewing 25 people, and we found out all sorts of stuff, right? So I'm like, I got enough to terminate him, like just from dumb stuff. I have a library of dumb stuff, but this is the guy, like, he was always making environments more anxious than they were. And like, this happened like almost 10 years ago. And like, he would just say obnoxious things, like really stupid, obnoxious things that would insult people. That just like, dude, you're moving from like 15 degrees off cool to like way off base, right? Just wants to shock people. You know, he just got a kick out of that. Well, we went through everything, and I'm talking to the CEO. I said, I got enough to fire him, but I got to tell you, something's still nagging me, and I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it. I said, I want another day to let me just go through everything, because I'm missing something, and I know I am. He goes, not a problem. So I finally got a breather. This is like 5 days, 24 people, going back and forth, on the road 4 hours a day. And I get a chance to go into my office, and I shut the door, and I just lock everybody out. Like, I just need to introvert right now. So I pull out his employee file, and I'm flipping through it, and I see prior documentation. Like, this was the guy we never should have hired. And they knew it, and they did it anyway, right? This man should have never met me, ever. So I'm flipping through. The next one I flipped through, and I had ice running through my veins, and I found what I was looking for, and I go, holy crap. Grab the document, make about 16 photocopies of it, put the folder up, stuck it in my drawer. I'm not really sure if I locked it or not, and I shot out of there. And I'm on the road. I call the special agent that I was working with. I'm like, I need you in your office in an hour and a half. Can you do that? He says, yeah. I said, when I get there, I need you to pull his badge photographs. What? I said, trust me, I'll explain it when I get there. I call the CEO, and he goes, where are you? I said, I'm in the car. I'm on my way back up. He goes, you found something? I said, yeah, I did. I said, I will call you when I have more. I said, but this is it. This is what I was missing. He goes, okay, I trust you, right? I'm like, great. So I rush in, like, I didn't even lock, like, my purse was in the freaking car still. Like, I just grabbed my keys and go. I don't even know if I locked it or not. I shot in there so fast. I'm out of breath, and like from like 50 feet, and I'm nervous, right? And so I said, I think I found it. And I said, can you pull up the photographs? And so he says, yeah, what is this about? And I said, just trust me on this, right? So I want you to pull up his base photograph. So his face is average, like nothing spectacular, which is exactly what I was anticipating. And I said, that's perfect. This is exactly what I want to see. And he goes, what? And I said, all right, now I want you to pull up the photograph of the Aurora, Colorado shooter. You know, the guy that shot up everybody in the Batman movie opening? He says, yeah, the Dark Knight film. He says, yeah. I said, pull it up. So he pulls it up, and I said, now I want you to keep that there, and I want you to pull up the guy that shot Gabby Gifford. And he said, the senator? I said, yeah. Congresswoman? Yeah. He said, yeah, pull it up. And I said, now I want you to put them side by side. And we looked at those pictures, and, you know, they had that wild-eyed, you know, their globes in their eyes were literally coming out because they were amped, right? That is an amped face, because when you watch the court documents from the gentleman from the Aurora shooting, like, you see his face slowly coming back down to normal, right? So whatever was going on, both of them had that look. I pull out the envelope, and I put the paper down, and it was a picture of his driver's license mirroring those two guys.
Oh, that's so creepy.
And I got chicken skin right now. And I said, I think we got a problem. And the guy's like, this is enough for me. So I immediately put a bolo out on the base. I called up the CEO while I was in the security office, and I said, I told him the situation. I had him do exactly the same thing. And I told him, I said, this is what his driver's license is looking at. I said, we got somebody that is kind of copycatting this, right? I said, this is enough for me. I have been through enough active shooter training to know that this guy's falling in the stage somewhere. There's like 5 stages to it. Like, the 5 is the actual execution of the plan. Like, they've pulled the trigger at that point. We're somewhere between, in my opinion, 3 and 4, right? It's getting, it is, and if there's anything that I know, when it comes to somebody who does anything, like if you look at the average person who's stealing money from a company, they start little and then they work their way big, right? So behavior always escalates until they're busted. This is not something that we can allow to escalate. We're responsible for the other, 76 people, 78, 80 people on our payroll, not one person. And he goes, do it. I'm like, all right. So I went home, got ready for everything on Monday, and I can't remember if it was after I terminated him or if it was before. I think it was after. I got a chance to pull his iPad because I was looking at everything else. I was like, I'm just trying to figure. Once I saw that, it was, to me, I was done. I was so confirmed when I went through his iPad. This is our equipment, by the way. He was using our company email.
Military equipment.
Yeah. Well, not military. We're civilian.
Yeah,
right?
but on a military base.
It's business, yeah. So, or a government base. So, I'm looking through his iPad and I'm go through the history, and I'm searching his email and everything that's in. Like, he's using our business email for all of his personal stuff, and I see all of these wild headlines from these like underground news agencies, conspiracy theory stuff. Then I go into his browser history, and he's shopping for telescopes, binoculars. He's shopping for monoculars. And then I found the gun scopes, and I'm just like, I don't know if this guy would have followed through on this plan or not, but whatever it is, I got it, and I stopped it.
I mean, kudos to you for being able to, like...
Did they pick him up? Did they, I mean, it's
No.
speculation, I guess.
There's no crime that's being committed. We stopped. So, an accident is nothing but a series of incidents in a chain that hasn't been interrupted, right? So that's how I looked at this. Like, we interrupted. Whether he was really going to do it or not, we will never know. But there was enough there for us that we couldn't ignore the signs. And I'm fully convinced that he was going to do something. And the reason why I said that is because one of the first things that I had to write him up for was, the thing about where we were is that there's all these different types of containers of gas. And he was making statements about like anybody can come here and put a 50 cal round into that and blow the whole thing up. And I'm like, you can't talk like that. First off, we're not in the Middle East, okay?
Yeah.
We're not in a wartime situation. Nobody just has a 50 cal roaming around in their pocket. And we're in the middle of frickin' nowhere, right? Who cares? Just target practice. I'm like, come on. It's not anything, it's nothing critical.
But who says that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? But that's the message that I had to convey to him is like, this is not appropriate conversation. Like, you're not an operator, right? You're not a SEAL.
Yeah.
Like, come on. We're not going there. And I told him, I said, we're not going there. That's when I've hit my limit, that's my phrase. We're not going there. Right? And that's exactly what I told him. I said, we're not going there. And I expect you to. Right? So I had to reset expectations with him. Well, 6 weeks later, 2 months later, we're having a harder conversation. And so that following Monday, after everything was investigated, I had his 2 managers sitting with me, plus the director, the security director that I was working with, the security agent I was working with, and I'm terminating him over the phone. And they said, like, how are you going to do this? And I said, I'm going to treat him compassionately like a human being. And the reason why is because we're about ready to pull the rug out underneath his feet. He already knows it. He knows it's coming, but what I don't want him to do 5, 6, 7, 8 months down the road, if he can't find work, is to remember this day. Because this is the day that is going to make his life hell. And that's what he's going to remember if he's sitting in a poopy diaper, right? If he's feeling sorry for himself, or he gets financially. Now, there were some other details that I'm not going to go into that I know he had other income coming in. So I wasn't as worried about that. But when you have somebody, like, anytime somebody gets fired for they're caught doing something, they go through the 7 stages of grief, just like somebody when they're passing away. And what happens, and I'm like, I'm telling you right now, he's going to call me one day and he's going to tell me all the shitty things that happened to him at work. The funny part is that when the day that he did that were all the things that everybody said that he was doing outside of the base. So all the problems that he was complaining about, he now blamed everybody on the inside. I already had all that documented. So he was lying. And I predicted it, and I was ready for it, and I just like, you know what, I really appreciate you telling me this. Understand, I'm not bringing you back in as an employee, but I'm going to investigate this. The good news is I already did it,
Yeah.
So I wasn't lying. I was treating him with as much compassion and as much as respect as I could, and I would ask him, I'm like, you got your letter, right? Yes. Okay, you know the instructions in there. Here's about your benefits. Here's about where you can go. Like, I gave him the best customer service he ever experienced in his life, right? And that kept the temper down. That's what keeps people from not lashing out, unless they're, got a personality issue or, they have narcissistic tendencies. Yeah, unless they're more of an extreme thing. He wasn't like that. He just liked to flip people's brains. But to do a copycat thing like that, that's another level. Remember, bad behavior escalates. So if that's what he was going to do, and he's talking about putting 50 cal rounds in an area where only the deer and the antelope play, right? What is that person capable of?
Yeah,
I don't
what
know.
comes after that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So under normal conditions, so like some people will say, well, like, how did you do this? Depending upon the severity of what it is, like if you actually weapon in hand and you stop something, and thankfully those incidences have happened in the world, law enforcement absolutely needs to be involved. I think this is the only time, and I said this in my speech, this is the only time I've ever lied in my career, ever. I had to tell the managers what happened without telling them what happened. And they sat down and we said, this individual is no longer with us. It was severe enough that the COO came and sat with me and did this. And I led the meeting and I said, there's nothing bad. We just want to let you know, we know that you guys have concerns about this person's performance on a day-to-day basis, but we're just wanting to let you guys know nothing has happened. And this person is now no longer working with us. In addition to that, he is going to be stopped at the gate, and we've already revoked his access to our area that we control. So there's 2 layers. If he tried to get to you, he can't get past any. There's a bolo out everywhere for him. And one of the managers, it was a female, and she goes, do you think he's a threat? And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, God, I don't know. And so I told him, I looked at him deadpan in the head, and I said, no, I don't believe he's a threat at all. And the reason why I said that is because I know that if people are so concerned about what he's doing, what we do is dangerous stuff. And I needed them 100% focused on their job, not worrying about, is he going to show up somewhere?
Yeah.
We've already got that part covered. I need them to focus in on making sure that they're operating in a safe place, that somebody's not going to get hurt or get injured. And it's the only time I've ever lied. Wow. And I remember thinking on the way home, like, God, please don't let me regret that lie.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the few excusable instances right there where you have to take the other people's mindset and safety into consideration and how they feel just showing up.
There's a lot of courage in doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And that is a prime example of that. It was completely against my integrity. It was completely against how I communicate. It literally violated every one of my core values. But it was the right thing to do.
And
that is a hard pill to swallow. And let me tell you something. I took 3 days off after that to decompress. And I was also very lucky that I had a team guy that I was coaching at the time that I could talk to him about this. And I'm like, am I being oversensitive? And he's like, absolutely not. And I mean, this is a guy who's, knows when the bad guys are trying to kill him. I mean, it's like he's a master at this, right? So I would tell him, you know, I can't get into the deep details of it, and I still couldn't back then. But like, I'm like, here's what's going on. And he's like, you're absolutely doing the right thing. He says, you are spot on right now. And it was really great to have that validation because nobody else around me knew what to do. That's why I'm paid the big dollars, is to come in and do that. So, you know, that lesson really taught me that I'm really good at crisis management, way more. And any time now that there was an active shooter situation that came out, the CEO and I were right in the office, sitting there watching the TV for a couple hours, eating lunch, just paying attention because, you know, copycatter, like, you know, it really rattled us for a little bit.
Wow.
And you know, that's the thing, is just like, people judge leaders all the time for what they see on the outside. What they have no idea is what's really going on behind closed doors. So like, there are times where I've been 30 minutes away from having to support a CEO from shutting down the business, and that PPE loan got funded 30 minutes before we closed the doors. That's a lot of nerve-wracking stuff, right? So I took about 3 days off, and I decompressed, and I really needed it because I was laying in bed like starting to twitch. You know, it wasn't good.
Yeah, that story is not any less powerful the second or third time I've heard it now. Like, still gives me chills just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, what else does Brenda do to like decompress and have fun outside of all that Brenda does?
All that Brenda does. Well,
besides beating
Brenda
Jay in like shooting competitions and all these weird things you get to go do every now and then.
I took my first vacation in 9 years this past December, and I went on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise before. Yeah, I went with a very good friend of mine. We did the Eastern Caribbean cruise, and that was awesome. And I mean, there were days we'd come off of the deck, we're getting ready for dinner. I'd walk right into my cabin, and I just like, tears are flowing, just so grateful to be in a freaking floating 4 and 5 star resort, you know, and it's just like, just releasing 9 years of stress and pressure and hustle and good stuff and bad stuff. And yeah, so apparently I've become a cruiser because I have 2 more books.
Nice, there you go.
So all with friends.
What else do you do for like hobbies, fun? Like what do you do to like get away from the work and the grind?
Well, I'm like any girl. I like to go shop. Like I went shopping, but I actually, like, it was really funny. I was having like an 80s flashback, and I just like walked a mall, and not like a mall walker, but I mean like I walked the mall like I used to when I was a kid on a Saturday. And I'm like, this is awesome. I put my AirPods in, and I'm like driven out to Duran Duran, and
Nice. We have a big state trade show coming up.
No.
And it's themed 90s and 2000s music in an intergalactic setting.
So it's like,
I'm having a lot of fun looking for like outfit to wear to this.
Like B-movie, space movies, intergalactic, or?
It just says like 90s and 2000s music
80s, that's my era, but
meets.
here you go. You ready? Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I was thinking like Beastie Boys Intergalactic, you know, like the whole like outfit and those like spacesuit things, like but I feel like everybody's gonna try to do that. But I have found some cool websites with some really interesting it's straight up like I found this one like
that's like this at the trade show.
it's just for the party. Like there's like a party on one of the nights where like they'll have DJ with music. Sometimes they bring bands in, but it's like themed and everything. I found these like purple, like almost MC Hammer looking pants with like the jacket. Man, it looks so awesome. I'm like, I think I'm gonna have to do this.
Oh, you should get like some flower pots and glasses of Devo.
Oh, that's so 80s.
I forgot 90s.
That's 80s. Yeah.
You gotta jump ahead, bro. Come on. All right, let's get some fun ones in here, because I feel like so much has turned serious, like with everything you do. Like
everything I do, serious. I
know.
I get ripped on for people telling me, well, you're such a rule follower. And I'm the one setting them. Like I have to.
Follower, I'm the one that makes them.
I have to. I can't make them and break them. Come on.
I mean, you've obviously worked with some of the toughest people that I can think of, from SEALs to high-performing operators to high-performing leaders. What do you think's the most difficult personality trait to manage in the workplace, and why?
Narcissists.
Narcissists?
People that have narcissistic tendencies, because and some of them, here's the thing, there is actually a disorder. And so people who, like, I can't rule somebody as having a disorder. I'm not a doctor, nor would I even try.
Yeah.
But the ones that do and are, right, it's a behavioral trait. They don't see what's going on. Like, they're not willing to go out and do the hard work to develop themselves, because they don't think that they need it, right? That's a hard person to handle.
For sure.
I mean, that'll suck the life right out of you. And it has in the past. I worked under one. All right, so I don't golf. Like, in my philosophy, if you find the ball, you win, okay? But I can drive the ball at fair distance.
All right.
Right?
So we're bringing you on our scramble team. Noted.
I can drive it. That's not a problem. Like, as far as I've gotten is about 300. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Couple times. Not consistently.
Okay.
So, anyway, so we were doing a team building, and he did not, it was manager, and I was the second highest in the store. So we were being paired together. And he was pissed. Oh my God, he was so pissed. He thought I was going to look, because I take no interest in all of his golfing stories. I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not rude or mean or anything. It's not what I do. So we get to the tee, and he whack sends it down, right? And he made me go last. And so we get there, and I'm looking at him, and he never asked me, like, have you ever played before or nothing. He's just made this huge assumption. So one of the guys goes, he says, okay, Brenda, your tee is up here. And I'm like, so I went back to the men's tee, and I sent it down range, and he looked at me. He's like, you never told me you could play golf. I'm like, I can't play golf. I can drive the ball, and he wouldn't talk to me the rest of the day either, because it's like, you just can't win.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not going to try either. But I never worked with anybody who cried on the property as much as he did. Like, he would just break down in tears, and I'm like, dude, I'm the girl. And I know that's a little judgy, but it was like, okay. So yeah, they can be pretty tough and exhausting. I'm a pretty forgiving person to a point, but when you start degrading me, like telling me I'm not worth anything, or I'm a worthless piece of blankety blank blank blank, right? I'm done. There's a limit.
Fair.
And you cross it, it's done.
All right, if you could have any superpower to help you navigate difficult personalities, what would it be and why?
Disappear so I can run out of the room. I have those moments where I'm just like, let me go.
Wasn't expecting that one.
I wish I had it's a double-edged sword type of thing. I wish I had the power to gift somebody the ability to, like, look inward and see what they're doing to themselves. Like, if they're treating somebody badly because of an insecurity, I wish I could gift them the foresight to say, listen, it's okay to have this insecurity. You got a chance right now to fix it, right? You got a chance right now to address it. And you're not broken. This just doesn't work for you, I wish I had that.
What's one thing you've learned about leadership that surprised you?
Leadership doesn't mean being liked. I always wanted to be liked as a leader, because I admired people, and I wanted that for myself, right? And earlier on, I would work so hard to get people to like me. And what I found out is that I was becoming a very weak leader. I was introducing weakness into my leadership because I was more concerned about being liked, even though I was still making the decisions of right and wrong and sticking to my principles and stuff like that. But I always wanted to be liked. And that's when I realized it's like, this is killing me. Like on the inside, I'm not gaining any sleep. My self-confidence is coming down. I don't even like myself right now. Right? I hate what's going on. Like it's not a working formula. And then once I started saying, well, you're not going to like me, but you know what? What if I treat you with the same amount of respect and I take on the mindset that that's okay that you don't like me, but you're still going to have to respect the decision. And if you can't respect the decision, now you don't have permission to be in my environment. It's okay to not like what somebody says, but it's not okay to show a level of respect.
Yeah, I can see that for sure, because I think that is definitely a mistake that a lot of people make. I know it's one I made very early on in my career. It used to bother me that another boss or leader pretty much said like the two different departments would never. And I was like, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, we're a team. We have to work together. Like, not that there's not going to be conflict and issues there, but then I think because of that, I went too far in the other direction of like wanting all of them to like me on that side.
Yeah.
On both sides of that. And that did the same thing you're saying there. It definitely added a weakness into some of that, because at a certain point I definitely cared more about like not rocking the boat with so-and-so or this person or that person because I wanted them to like me, and I thought I could still do both things. And then until I really figured out like the balance between that, like, that's a very real one that I think a lot of people go through.
Yeah, and what I started doing to navigate through that is I started focusing on building trust. Because when you trust somebody, you can look past that kind of stuff. You know, you can look past your expectations. You can kind of look past the grievances, because there's still elements of trust there. But when trust is gone, and I've gone toe to toe with some leaders. It's nerve-wracking as hell when you do it. It's not easy, and I don't always enjoy it, but I don't think I've ever enjoyed it. But when I've gone toe to toe with somebody, and when I realize that the sole problem is because there's no trust, I'll say, do you trust me on this? And they're hesitant to answer. That's when I know they don't. And I'll say it again, do you trust me on this? And they said no. And I said, why do you believe that is? And it breaches the conversation wide open, because they can't say anything else, and they can't run out of the building with their hair on fire, right? Because they're going to look foolish. I'm calling them to the mat to have the conversation. Why do you believe that is? And then the truth comes out. Maybe they heard something. Well, I know that this is, let's talk about that situation. Let's get some clarity, because you're making decisions based off of second and third level information rather than getting it from the horse's mouth, right? Let's talk about that. Let's knock all of this crap out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's bravery. You know, there's a lot of courage and a lot of bravery that has to happen when it comes into leadership, and not everybody wants to chomp on that bit, and that's fine, but it's only going to serve you so far. You're only going to go so far.
What's one habit or routine that you swear by to stay sharp and focused in your work?
Every morning, after I let the big dog out, I have a floof. I have a Great Pyrenees. He's awesome. He's my director of security. Everybody, when I do a webinar, they hear him. I'll take him out. I'll come back in, grab some coffee, and I sit down. I read the proverb of the day. And I've been slowly reading the entire Bible. So I'm in the Old Testament right now. I started with the New Testament. Man, I am so glad we live in New Testament era, because some of the stuff that comes up in Exodus is just creepy. Right? And I'm like, I'm so glad we don't have to do that. Anyway, that's what I do. So I'll read for a little bit, and I absorb it, and I figure out how's that working in my life. I'm doing a 365-day journaling devotional that was written by Pastor Keith Craft out of Elevate Life Church. And then I read, right now I'm reading the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Awesome, amazing book.
I read that a long time ago. That's one I need to put back in.
It's amazing, right? And believe it or not, I'm also reading a book called Heal Your Brain Every Day. And it is also like a daily thing. So I'm constantly developing myself. And I do it first thing in the morning because that's when I'm like ready to absorb whatever. Like everybody, most of us are like in our peak because we just got done with our sleep cycles, right? So our brain is recharged, for the most part. So my learning comes in the morning.
What time do you get?
What time?
Are you go 5 a.m. or?
I wake up whenever. And usually if I wake up on my own, it's right about 6:37. And if somebody has to go out, it's a paw to the face or a nose.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like, that dog uses his nose like it's a weapon, man. He knocks the bottles off the bathtub just because he can. Here's the other weird thing he does. Like if he wants my attention for something, he'll lay down in front of the toilet and flick the toilet seat with his nose incessantly until what do you want? It's the weirdest thing. I know, it's so funny.
My brat dog stole my wife's loofah. That's been his new thing lately. Do you know what a loofah looks like when it's torn apart, man? It looks like
shredded.
It looks like 1,000 feet of like ribbon or
Tool.
like a tutu.
Tool.
Like it's.
You never knew all that was in there.
No, dude, not that much. I mean, you've been to my house. Dude, it went from the dog door down the side, back multiple times, all over there in pieces. And I was like, oh, wow, you're in a lot of trouble. You have fun with that one.
That's funny.
Buddy. What's maybe a favorite book? You got like maybe like top 2 or 3 books like that have really been impactful for you?
Yeah. The one that really got, so there's 2 of them. The first one, I read it back in, is the early 90s. I was living in Hawaii. And is So a Man Thinketh. That is amazing. Have you ever read that?
No.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And so it's the story of this physician that was interred in a Nazi prison camp.
Oh, is that the Victor?
Yeah.
I have read that.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing book.
Yeah.
And this is the other one. If you have not read it, the movie does not, neither of the 2 movies that they did, one isn't even in the same movie under the title. It does them justice. Read In Harm's Way. And it's the story of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Yeah, you got to read that one.
Okay.
Got to read that one. And so those 2 really, really, really woke me up for some reason. I don't know. They just really just resonated with me. One of the other ones that, and I got the honor to kind of be a part of this, is the book Perfectly Wounded. And it's Mike Day's book. And Mike was one of my very close friends. And Mike, do you know who Mike Day is?
I know. I don't know him, but I know the name.
So Mike, believe it or not, was the inspiration for the Two Wolves book. And
really?
Yeah, he was. So Mike passed away 2 years ago. And he, on and off, was shot 27 times. Took 16 rounds on his limbs, took 11 rounds in the plate, and 1 in the scrotum, which he was extremely proud of. He would tell me the stories, and he's like, Brenda, he says, the last thing I remember, because that medic was all over me, he says, and just like, this guy, he got shot, got blown up by a grenade, took out the 4 guys with his handgun because he lost his main weapon, walked out to the helicopter, and like the whole op was going down. Look it up. It's an amazing story. Whole op was going down. He lost Clark, one of his guys, took a single round in his throat. Mike got shot 27 times, right? and goes walking out and gets Clark's radio. His was shot up, called everybody, made sure he had a head count for everyone, which would have prevented, some catastrophe. I think there was an airstrike that was planned or something like that. And walked out, and he said, Brenda, the last thing that I remember was laying down, and as soon as I heard them call out groin, he goes, that's okay, I've had a vasectomy, and then he passed out. So that's Mike. Then on his way back from Germany, he coded 3 times on the plane. SecNav came in to give him his Purple Heart, and he had a heart attack 30 minutes before that. So when you look at the picture of Mike in the wheelchair with that yellow, Teflon, kind of gown thing on, like he looks gray, ghosty white, and that was because he told me he just had another heart attack right before that. And SecNav was coming in, so they pinned it on his thing and got him right back in. So he had all these holes, right? And Jason has told this story. He told this story at Mike's memorial service, and Mike was laying in bed fully unclothed, right? So anytime somebody would come in, Mike would pull the sheet size because his testicles were like the size of a cantaloupe. And eventually it got to the point where his wife, whose name is also Brenda, and I love her, she's great, she's like, dang it, Mike. She goes, you stop doing that? And he says, it's funny. She goes, they're not even big anymore. So that's the fun in the community right there, right? And so, like I would get the 1 a.m. phone calls from Mike. What are you doing? I need to talk. Nothing, just laying here. What you got, right? And we would just sit and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And Mike, I am fully convinced that Mike had CTE, which wound up leading to him taking his life 2 years ago. And it's a thing, CTE is something in the community that can't be diagnosed unless it's postmortem, right?
Yeah.
You can only figure it out. So, but that's a book to read. And when Mike was in the process of writing that book, like I would sit with him while the author, the guy that was doing the writing for him, and Mike would just tell these stories over and over again. And the cool part with Mike was we would hang out, and Mike was always fascinated by hummingbirds. And he says, those little fuckers are strong, man. He's like, I sit and watch them all day long, and they're just really, really neat. So Two Wolves was actually inspired by Mike and a specific conversation that we had.
That's awesome, because it is truly a great book. Like I told you off record before here, when everybody's talking about their books and everybody's like, hey, check out here, I brought you a copy of my book and this and that. I'm like, oh, great, something else I don't want to read, or just is going to go on the shelf on the pile of every other book I have that I haven't started yet. And for whatever reason, after hearing you do your talk, like I was like, all right, I got to read this. And I did, and I read it really fast, too. I mean, it's not like a super long book.
Not a hard read.
It's not a hard read. But man, it's got some awesome lessons in it. Like, so yeah, I definitely want to check that out. It's funny you said that too about him talking about the big thing about getting shot in the scrotum. I remember that about Jay telling the story about when he called Erica, like, yeah, half my face is blown off, but it's still there. It's like, really? Like that's what you come up with. Like,
right. Yeah. So the funny part about that story and Mike was that after he's like, Jay was like, every time somebody comes, because they were in the hospital at the same time.
Yeah.
So, so one day, it was right when he was writing the book, he pulls out, his box of telltales, right, from the military, right? He's showing me all this stuff. I'm going through pictures, and then I get to this picture of him like this, right? And I look at him, I'm like this, and I told Jay, and I said, yeah, he still thought it was funny, and it was years later, because I got nailed by one of the photos, right? And we were just laughing about it. But yeah, Mike was really a great guy. He was highly decorated. He received the Navy Cross for his actions in service. And the man was a legend in the SEAL team.
What was the name of his book?
Perfectly Wounded.
Perfectly Wounded.
Read that book.
Okay. I'm going to have to check. I'm going to have to go through mine. Like, I've read so many.
I read that book in a day, and I don't do that.
The story sounds so familiar. Like, it also sounds like No Easy Day, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. I read that book in a day, and I don't read books in a day.
Yeah. All right.
If I read a book in a day, that means it's an awesome book.
I will check that out.
So, yeah, so that's one of the other books that really impacted me, and I got to be there part of the writing for that. at the hardest moments of that
That's
book. So
awesome.
what an honor that was. Let me tell you.
Absolutely. Well, I need to bring this to an end as long as I know you and I can talk all night here.
Yeah, we could do this for a while.
We could do this for a while. It's been great having you on here. I hope we get to do this again soon. But there's 2 questions we ask everybody. Since this is the 100th episode, I can't veer off from this right now. So what's one piece of advice that you would, if you could like leave your, if you had children or anything, like what's one piece of advice you would leave them with?
Be true to yourself, always. Never lose sight of that. Never lose sight of learning and being true to who you are, because it's going to serve you in the long run. And I mean, like at your root and core. I'm not talking about your opinions of things. I'm talking about your nature, your character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. That's awesome advice. All right, now's the fun one. Since it's common sense, we let everybody give us their 2 cents. And this could be anything. This could just be something that maybe I didn't ask you a follow-up question that you wanted to go further on, or maybe something you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, or maybe you just want to give Brenda's 2
My
cents
2
on
cents.
whatever.
So I'm going to give you my number 1 live and die rule. Are you ready?
Let's go.
In the absence of information, people make stuff up. So if you really want to be an amazing leader, you want to be an amazing impact on somebody's life, remember that when you're communicating and people don't have all the information, they're going to make up a story in their head because they can't handle the ambiguity. And if you don't believe me, watch a teenager girl date. Because I don't understand why he's not calling me. They're going to stalk that kid. They're going to wonder if he's off in the ditch somewhere, off of his BMX or whatever, right? I'm telling you right now, people, we don't handle ambiguity well. So if you're like, if somebody's coming up to you and saying, well, I don't really like working with Bob. Why? Because Bob says this, like, I know Bob doesn't like me. Well, really, why would you think that? Because Bob's always like, how do you know what Bob is thinking? You know?
Yeah.
They just made up a story about Bob. And we all do it. I do it, right? And I'm good at catching myself, but I still instinctively do it. We're wired that way, right? We just don't handle ambiguity well. So just remember that in the absence of information, people will make up stuff, including yourself. So be clear.
Awesome. If you guys didn't learn anything from this episode, I've got nothing else for you. I'm wasting my time. I have no idea where to go from there. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I hope you guys will give us a like, share, follow, and you guys will be back with us for many, many more. We got a lot of upcoming guests for you guys lined up for a good while. So I hope you guys will tune back in. We are going to make a few changes, so I wasn't going to do anything before episode 100, but stay tuned. We're going to have some changes. And Beyond the Amplifiers should hopefully be starting to come out by June. I'm trying to set a hard deadline of June for you guys so we can get something going. So anyways, thank you guys again so much for, 100 episodes, man. I have you guys to thank for tuning in, staying with me, and I hope to see you again next week. Peace.